All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rachah Kodash. Double honors to my apostles, a great millstone, and peace and salutation to the hopeful members of the elect, the Bacharim, the house of David, that's been preordained, predestined to get delivered in these last end times, and to be the ruling, governing body of the nation, Yasha Allah, and the whole world. Now, this is from Riyadh's report. I like the young brother. He's very informative, and it's titled "Ceasefire in the Middle East is Done. U.S. and Iran trading strikes. Will this ever end?" And we know that all this will eventually end. All right, it's going to be followed through. It's going to be followed by economic collapse. Then World War III after. Well, economic collapse, mass chipping, the RFID chip, the MOTB, which stands for Mark of the Beast, and then World War III. And then after that, America will be nuked, but at the same time, once those missiles are shot off, Yahushai will, he'll already, be over here already, actually, before the missiles shoot off, because he's going to make his way to the Middle East, the Arabian region, and destroy all those armies over there. So before the missiles are shot off, okay? But when he makes his presence known over here in America, and helps the holy angels get to work, laser beaming and, destroying, okay? Those missiles will be shot off, and then he will deliver the elect throughout the four corners of the earth, okay? So I'm going to skip through the timeline because he goes into some pretty good information. All right. So I just want you to listen first, okay? So we'll start at this one right here, the 1 hour and 10-minute mark.
The latest violence has centered on the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has asserted that the terms of the deal give it oversight of the waterway and has demanded that ships use Iran's preferred routes. The United States has accused Iran of repeatedly targeting ships in the Strait, although Tehran has not claimed responsibility for a series of strikes in recent weeks. The strikes that began just before midnight in Tehran on Wednesday were the second in 2 days by the U.S. in response to attacks on 3 commercial vessels. Ostensibly it's 4. I don't know what the official number is, but Iran has been aggressive towards several different tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. But let's see here. The United States also revoked a sanctions waiver on Iran's oil industry, a provision of the ceasefire. So they were going to allow them to make money off of the oil sales, and now they've revoked that license in response to Iran being aggressive with these oil vessels coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, in case that wasn't clear. Shipping traffic in the Strait of Hormuz has once more come to a...
Right, and without halting the Strait of Hormuz, all right, it's going to cause devastation to world economies, okay? Not just America. He's going to go into it, okay? Europe, Asia, expect prices to rise even more. Everything's going to be very uncomfortable, okay? And eventually we're talking about a lights out situation, just like what's happening in Cuba. And he's going to go into all of this. So let's continue.
The temporary truce was intended to reopen the strait and stop the fighting, but left some of the thorniest issues, particularly Iran's nuclear program, to be negotiated during a 60-day period. On Wednesday, however, Iranian media outlets close to its military published editorials calling for the official end of the deal. A social media account belonging to Iran's supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei posted a doctored image depicting a snake emanting from Mr. Trump's signature on the ceasefire deal. What else to know, and I can quickly run through this as well. Oil prices, which had fallen back to near pre-war levels following the ceasefire deal, rose 5% to about $78 a barrel. That is down from its peak during the worst of the fighting, but its pre-war price of around $72 a barrel, whatever. I'm not going to read all of that because really I want to get into all the developments.
So let's, I'll just wait maybe about 20 more seconds. I'm going to skip over.
This article makes it quite clear. Let me get all these tabs out the way. Let's see. So my apologies. So look, the article makes it clear, and this is what we've been talking about ad nauseum, okay? A few weeks back, about a month now, the United States had signed the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran. And the goal of this MOU, this basis of understanding, was to create a buffer period so that they can actually get somewhere in negotiations. But there were factors that were binding upon the Memorandum of Understanding to continue. Iran, one of the most biggest, or categorically the largest ask that they had from the United States and Israel, by the way, was to cease hostilities in Lebanon and pull out and stop aggressing.
Right, and the MOU, I asked it earlier in Grok, so you know what it is. Okay, let's go to it. All right, what is the MOU? The MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that J.D. Vance has spoken about, is a preliminary U.S.-Iran agreement signed in mid-June 2026 by Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian representatives, reportedly including Speaker Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf. Key details. Purpose: it aims to end hostilities described as the U.S.-Israel war on Iran, open the Strait of Hormuz for shipping, and start negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. It includes a 60 window for further talks excuse me, and implementation. Okay? So, we got that, and ultimately, this war will pick up again. All right, let me get a scripture. This war will pick up and be full-fledged in World War III. All right, 2 Ezra chapter 15, verse 28. Behold, in horrible vision and the appearance thereof from the east. Where's the east? The so-called Middle East, all right? Where the nations of the dragons of Arabia should come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble. Also the Carmenians, okay? The Carmenians are the Iranians. Also the Carmenians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come. That great power is who? Russia, okay? And, you know, other alliances as well. You know, you can include China, but mainly Russia. Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, right? It says, enjoying battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. The Assyrians are the U.S. soldiers, you know. So it's going to be a bloody bath over there in that region, the land that's barren and desolate, the so-called Middle East, okay? But that's when it's full-fledged World War III. All right, so this you know, ceasefire, all right, this MOU, okay? Well, now I believe it ended. It says ceasefire in the Middle East is done, right? You know, so eventually this thing will die down and it'll pick back up again. But ultimately it'll pick back up when, you know, when the RFID chip is fully established, you know, being forced upon the masses. And then World War III will pick up, and man, right there, Yahushua, he's about to come in the midst, okay? The kingdom of heaven will be established. So we got to wait for a few more, you know, couple more prophecies, right? So let's get let me go to the 1 hour and 20 minute mark. All right, he's gonna break it down.
And dominance in the Strait of Hormuz. And that is not beneficial for anybody, but it's really painful for the United States, because the United States...
Yeah, the Strait of Hormuz, remember, all right, what, like 20% of the world's oil comes from that area. You know, they need it for shipping, for cargo vessel ships to go through and transport and export. All right, many countries rely on that strait, okay?
Needs this strait to open. It's 1/5 of the world's oil. Otherwise, the world is going to fall into economic disaster, and potentially some parts of Europe and Asia will fall into darkness.
Yeah, and that's what they want, you know. And then when I say they, I'm talking about the international banking families. That's what they want, okay? This is all orchestrated, you know. This is not coincidence, all right? Let me get Job, the 18th chapter. This is it's a trap. This man's setting for himself, because he's doing this, you know, international banking families. They think, you know, doing this, they can have a new world order come a phoenix rising out of the ashes, so to speak, okay? Which they're not going to get very far, all right? They're going to chip them, you know, a lot of people, okay? But then World War III is going to pop off, and And then what? Yahweh Shai's gonna come back. You know, America's gonna be nuked. You heathens are gonna be in slavery. You international breaking families, you'll be the first crop of slaves, and your kingdom is gonna be done, cease. All right. So all these little things you're doing, you really set up a trap for yourself. And let's just say hypothetically, this wasn't the elites, right? Well, all these, attacks that the U.S. and Israel is doing to Iran is still, like a trap they're setting for themselves, because again, that Strait of Hormuz is very vital for world economies. All right. And this is going to piss off a lot of nations, even the U.S. allies. Remember, like you just said, Europe and Asia, they rely on it, and they can go in total, they can fall. All right, go in dark. All right, go in darkness. Okay. So let me get Job chapter. Let me see. Bear me 1 second. I hope these people don't come up in here. I notice when people see you and you're like doing a lesson, that's when they want to bother you. Hold on. But this is Job chapter 18, verse. Let me see. It's like I'm just looking out the window. These people want to just be a nuisance. Hold on. All right. So Job chapter 18, verse, about that. Verse 8. For he is cast into a net, a trap by his own feet, and he walketh upon a snare. All right, let me get the G&T. Bear me 1 second. This thing will take a million years to load. Okay, and it says the same thing, same verse, chapter. It says in verse 8, Job 18, verse 8, they walk into a net and their feet are caught. Okay? A trap catches their heels and holds them. So they set up a trap, they set up all these things that they're doing. They're like they're falling into their own trap. All right. Again, these elites, they're orchestrating all this. They want this collapse to happen. All right. Not knowing that they're being governed by the Heavenly Father first. All right. But the quicker they do this, all right, the mass chip and all that, it's basically going to be out of their hands. They thinking that they're going to have control, but it's really going to get out of their hands. There's going to be so much chaos, and devastation. It's literally going to just fall out of their hands. All right. And then it's going to be followed by World War III. Okay. It's going to be a bloody mess. All right. Throughout the earth. Okay. So let's go back to Riyadh.
Oil shortages are now going to reach a level that is actually concerning. Before it was there are strategic reserves, we've got strategic petroleum reserves, and so it's not a worry. We can dip into that as we're fighting Iran, right. But these are running lower. And
again, oil, you need that for vessels, ships, but also transportation. Transporting resources, commodities, right? These truckers, they need oil, all right. And then also LNG, all right, liquefied natural gas. You need that to, for the power grid, okay? So without those two components, that's a lights out situation. It's going to be bad all around, It's going to be bad, okay? Like my man Destin Poirier, it's going to be bad, my nigga. But seriously, it's going to be a lights out situation, okay? Just like what's happening in Cuba, It's literally lights out over there. No electricity, no power. All right. Which the Cubans are the tribe of Manasseh. Okay.
Lower. And so when they run lower and lower, that means prices are going to raise higher and higher to the point where things are unaffordable, and really just to the point where there's no access to oil anymore the same way there was for civilian use. And so it might be a similar situation like we saw in Cuba, where countries have to go into darkness for certain periods of time if the Strait.
And that's, see, the thing is though, it's not going to be a period of time. Once it's a lights out situation, once they, and who knows how that's going to come. They might do an EMP attack as well. But once that happens, that's it. You know, there's no coming back. All right, there's no coming back.
Stays closed, which now, as a result of all their aggression, it's closed. And a lot of countries depend directly upon these Gulf suppliers for their oil to power their countries and their power grids. Many countries in Asia, many countries in Europe, these ships do pass through the Strait of Hormuz and go around through the Red Sea, through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and then all the way through the Suez Canal, northern Egypt, to get to Europe as well. And so many countries may suffer economically and from an energy perspective as a result of these escalations continuing. And so now, I don't want to get into that too much. Let me keep going through what happened. On Tuesday, I have it written here, the United States revoked the oil license for Iran. And so, to me, that was the first sign that all bets are off, because we used releasing oil sanctions on Iran to make everything sweet for them so that they would not respond to Israel's aggression in southern Lebanon. The whole reason why we were playing nice with Iran is because we're desperate for the Strait to open up. If we're not desperate, then why exactly did we stop the war? Why exactly did we enact the MOU for a breather, as JD Vance said online? It's because it was hurting us. And so we threw everything at Iran to tell them, chill out, please stop. We need the Strait open. Gave them $300 billion from the Gulf, released oil sanctions. We were talking about reparations potentially as well on the side. We probably gave them more money that's not even on the record. Frozen assets in the Gulf countries, unfrozen for them, from Qatar specifically. So Iran was getting a ton of deals. Iran was getting a lot of sweet talk. And on top of all of that, they still had control of the Strait, and they were still tolling the ships, and we were even fine with that so long as they allowed the ships to flow through. Let the oil flow. As Donald Trump has famously said several times, even though the oil has not been flowing, and when it flows, it's short-lived because there's always some sort of interference and there's always some sort of jab to try and undermine Iran's control of the Strait, which hurts the world's standing as a result, which hurts the global economy as a result. And so in retaliation, not only did we revoke their oil license, but we also bombed them, I think from yesterday until today, right now as I'm speaking to you, 20 plus times. Qashem Island, Bandar Abbas, other provinces in southeastern Iran and Iran along the entire coastline, the U.S. has been relentless in bombing Iran. And so now it seems like, and this is what Trump was saying at the NATO summit, this ceasefire is completely off. The ceasefire is done, the MOU is done, and if they're not saying it's done, I'm telling you it's done, because now the two countries are at full-fledged war again. And I know we saw some escalation.
Yeah, and you see, and this is, again, prophecy. That's how you know the scriptures are true, okay? Because all this really started by who? Israel, which are who? Amalekites, all right? The fake Jews, the fake, what they call themselves Israeli, all right? Because the true Israelites are you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and we also been scattered throughout the four winds of the earth. So we're going to come looking like every other nation. But you see, they dragged us into this war. Jeremiah 50, verse 45. And it says, therefore hear ye the counsel of the Lord, Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai, that he had taken against Babylon, America, and his purposes, that he had purpose against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Who is the least of the flock? Israel. Okay? Draw them out where? Into the Middle East region. All right? And doing what they're doing now. Okay? Bombing Iran. They took out their supreme leader. And Iran retaliated by hitting and bombing the U.S. allies, which are the Gulf countries, all right, the GCC, because, it's asymmetrical warfare for them, all right? So they're doing whatever they can, which is, a pretty smart move, all right? And it's just going to be a domino effect, all right? And it's going to just cause major chaos, okay? Again, without that Strait of Hormuz, which is very vital, All right, 1/5 of the world's oil, and then he also mentioned the Red Sea, which I believe what the Houthis they're trying to like halt that as well, which is like another 12% of the world's oil. Okay, so like 32% altogether. It's going to be a major chaotic event, just falling. All right, and it says, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. America, so Israel has what? Has, drawn out American troops to fight their battle. All right. Remember all those Marines that went out there, okay? And U.S. soldiers. All right, and they can't penetrate through Iran's, mountainous regions. It's difficult. All right. Not even King Alexander, he couldn't even do that, Like their mountainous region is like a fort, it's like a fortified wall, naturally, okay, by itself. And it says, surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them. At the noise of the taking of Babylon, the earth is moved, because America will be nuked by ICBMs, okay? And the cry is heard among the nations. All right. So let's continue.
And they were micro, they weren't so large during the midst of the MOU, and so no one was super concerned about that. But Iran didn't like it every single time. And let me tell you, every single time the United States was aggressive to Iran for no good reason, and every single time Israel was aggressive to Lebanon for no good reason, during the midst of the MOU, and so no one was super concerned about that. But Iran didn't like it every single time. And let me tell you, every single time the United States was aggressive to Iran for no good reason,
right,
and
exactly. Doing what they always do. All right, they'll say a ceasefire and they'll lie and break it. All right, they'll break their truce. Okay, because Esau Edom is the devil. He can't keep his word, and again, he's a very vile person. All right, the basis of all men.
Single time Israel was aggressive to Lebanon for no good reason, Iran had a paper on them, and they were counting the tallies. And this situation in the Strait of Hormuz was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so now it seems like all bets are off. How do I know that? Because as I'm speaking to you now, Iran is currently bombing all of the GCC countries that it was targeting in the beginning of this war after February 28th, like Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, other ones.
U.S. allies, by the way. All right. And now they're going to break ties with the U.S. Okay.
Eastern Jordan is even sounding off sirens allegedly right now, as I'm reading on X, and everything is developing, so we're going to have to deal with the fog of war again. But we know that Iran is sending out missiles, and they've got a stockpile that, according to U.S. intelligence, was at 75%, and according to Iran themselves, they said this through their own media, it's at 120%. And from both sides, it seems like the U.S. was never accurate and Iran was always accurate, because right now they're on top of us in this war because we've always lied about everything. So, every escalation in this war just digs us into a deeper hole. The United States, as much as they've been aggressive against Iran in retaliation for hitting these oil vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, that doesn't help us. And reluctantly, we have to respond. But the only reason we're responding is to show strength and to show that we're not going to be subjugated to their aggression in the Strait of Hormuz against 1/5 of the world's oil supply. That's going to hold the entire world victim as a result. So we have to respond to show some sort of strength, to show some sort of solidarity for these oil vessels, but most importantly, to make it seem like we have security and control of the strait when need be, which we don't. And the desperation to try and jump into the strait and make it seem like we have control always pushes the ceasefire, or will always push the ceasefire and continue to push it back and further and further, to the point where all bets are going to be off, and it's going to be nearly impossible to exercise diplomacy with Iran without giving them everything they want. A time existed where we could have spoken to Iran and they would have actually been reasonable and capitulated to some degree, because we weren't continuously aggressive, stabbing them in the back and destroying their trust. But now, since we've had this MOU, the 60-day buffer, and then all these other ceasefires and these 14-point proposals and the talks in Switzerland and the talks in Istanbul sorry, not Istanbul, Islamabad, Pakistan, with JD Vance, and none of that's worked, and we're still bombing them, trying to show that we control the strait. It's motivating Iran to say, you know what, forget everything. We can stick through this conflict. We don't need the oil, you do.
Yep.
You do, the rest of the world does. We'll make the world pay for you not knowing how to
And that will make these allies of the U.S. very angry.
control yourself. And that's really just been the case. And so every single time there's an escalation, it's demoralizing.
You know, and I can see why the scriptures say, because you're starting to see that hatred build up. You know, when it said they shall hate the horde, the U.S., talking about the U.S. allies, that's not going to just happen overnight. We're seeing this hatred being built up. All right. Let's see. Revelation 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns are the EU, which thou sawest upon the beast, shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Okay? Because they will send off their missiles and hit America as well. They will shoot their ICBMs. Okay? And I can see, again, this is like, we're seeing like the buildup of this hatred. It's not going to just happen overnight. No, it's just, it's going to be so much, you know, again, like, you know, the U.S. is just has a long receipt. It's going to have a long receipt of just doing BS. That's going to anger these other nations, all right? Because they're messing up, you know, these other nations' economy, all right? And it's already getting bad, you know, in some parts of Europe already, okay?
Because it puts us further and further away from being able to allow Iran and conceding to anything that we desire. What's the goal of the United States? Iran can't have a nuclear program. At one point, it was their ballistic missiles program can't go any farther than the eye could see. They can't fund their proxies. Remember, these were all the claims. These were all the things that we were going to ask them, allegedly, before we started the war on February 28th. And that all regressed to open the strait up. Right. You know, we started this war bold.
And, you know, that's about it. I'm not going to go too long. Maybe it's less than too long. But hopefully, you know, it was edifying enough. You know, I'm ending it off here. You can watch the rest on this young man's channel. All right, Riyadh's report. All right, he went live. Go in the live section. He has it right here. So hopefully this is edifying. All right, on to the next one. Shalom.